Imagine walking into the most luxurious car dealership in the city, only to be ignored because of how you look. Sounds unbelievable, right? But that's exactly what happened to Sandra. A simple woman, dressed in nothing more than a plain dress and comfortable shoes, was treated like she didn't belong, until the next day, when her billionaire husband showed up in a Rolls-Royce. What happened next will leave you stunned. It was a sunny afternoon when Sandra, a simple, kind-hearted woman, stepped into the most luxurious car dealership in the city. The sunlight danced on the polished showroom windows as she pushed open the glass door. Dressed in a modest, plain cotton dress and a pair of well-worn but comfortable flats, she looked nothing like the typical clientele this place catered to. In one hand, she carried an old, faded tote bag, more functional than fashionable. Sandra wasn't flashy, and she never had been. But she was practical, thoughtful, and today, she was curious. Her husband had been talking for weeks about getting her a new car. He wanted her to have something both elegant and safe, something that matched her grace and reliability. Sandra, however, wasn't sure about diving into the world of luxury vehicles. She wasn't one for extravagance. Still, she thought it wouldn't hurt to see what was out there. So, on a whim, she decided to visit the city's most high-end dealership to get a sense of what such a car might look or feel like. As she walked inside, she paused to take in the space. The dealership gleamed with sophistication. Rows of pristine vehicles lined the floor, sleek, streamlined machines that seemed more like works of art than mere modes of transportation. The smell of new leather filled the air, mingling with the soft scent of polished wood and expensive cologne. Chrome accents sparkled under the well-placed lighting, and the gentle hum of background music added to the luxurious atmosphere. It was a world far removed from the practical car lots she was used to. Sandra wandered deeper into the showroom, her eyes scanning the cars with genuine wonder. She admired the craftsmanship, the technology, the way each vehicle seemed to embody a promise of safety, comfort, and style. She leaned in to peer through the window of a sleek silver sedan, imagining what it might feel like to sit behind the wheel. But as the minutes ticked by, she began to notice something else, something colder. No one had greeted her. Several well-dressed salespeople stood chatting near the front desk. Others were engaged with customers who arrived in luxury suits, designer handbags, and sparkling watches. One salesman looked at her briefly, then turned away. Another passed her without a word, his eyes flicking past her as if she were invisible. She stood near a car with a bright red finish, hoping someone might approach. But no one came. It was as if, in her plain clothes and quiet demeanor, she didn't belong. Sandra's heart sank slightly. She hadn't expected a red carpet, but she had expected a hello. A smile. Some acknowledgement. She wasn't just browsing for fun, she was seriously considering a purchase. But clearly, appearances meant more here than curiosity or sincerity. Still, she didn't leave right away. She took one more slow walk around the showroom, her chin a little higher now, before turning and exiting into the sunlight, still kind-hearted, still curious, but now also quietly resolved. Sandra took a deep breath and approached a group of salespeople who were gathered near the dealership's sleek, modern reception desk. They were laughing among themselves, clearly relaxed and at ease, sipping coffee from branded mugs and exchanging light jokes. Though their suits were impeccably tailored and their watches gleamed under the soft showroom lighting, their laughter had an edge of arrogance, something Sandra hadn't expected to encounter. With her usual politeness, she stepped closer and gently asked, "Excuse me, could someone help me look at a few models?" The group fell momentarily silent, all eyes turning toward her. One of the salespeople, a sharply dressed young man named Chris, looked her up and down. His gaze lingered on her plain dress, her simple shoes, and the old tote bag hanging from her shoulder. There was a flicker of something, disdain, perhaps, in his eyes before he plastered on a professional, but clearly insincere, smile. "Ma'am," he said smoothly, "these cars are quite expensive. We usually work by appointment, with serious buyers." His words hung in the air like a slap. Another salesperson, a tall man with a flashy tie and a smirk, leaned in slightly and added, "Yeah, maybe try something more budget-friendly down the street." A chuckle escaped him, and Chris cracked a grin in response. Sandra stood frozen for a moment, stunned. Their words weren't just dismissive, they were humiliating. She hadn't expected red carpet treatment, but she also hadn't expected to be judged so openly, so cruelly, based on her appearance. She was a grown woman, an intelligent and capable one, who had come in with genuine interest. Did her simple clothing really mean she wasn't worth their time? But she didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice or defend herself. Instead, with quiet grace, she simply nodded and said, "Thank you." Her voice was calm, but her heart ached. She turned and walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. The dealership's glass doors closed behind her with a soft whisper, separating her from the cruel laughter that followed. They were laughing again, at her. They didn't see the tears beginning to well up in her eyes. Out in the sunlight, Sandra paused. She wiped her eyes quickly, unwilling to let the world see her pain. She wasn't embarrassed because she had been turned away, she was hurt because she had been judged without a single question, a single moment of real attention. No one had asked what she wanted. No one had cared enough to listen. But as she stood there, breathing deeply, something changed. Her sadness slowly gave way to quiet determination. She may have walked out of that dealership feeling small, but she wouldn't stay that way. She deserved better, and she knew it. Let them laugh, she thought. They had no idea who they had just dismissed. The next day, the luxury car dealership buzzed with its usual energy. Phones rang incessantly, keyboards clicked, and the scent of fresh coffee mixed with the gleam of polished chrome. Salespeople moved briskly between customers, closing deals, arranging test drives, and checking their schedules. It was business as usual, until a sound unlike any other shattered the rhythm of the day. A deep, throaty engine growl rolled through the air like thunder, commanding attention. Conversations halted mid-sentence, heads turned, and a hush fell over the showroom. Outside, a custom black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop in front of the entrance. It was sleek, commanding, and unmistakably custom, a car that didn't just suggest wealth, but whispered it with confidence. The kind of vehicle that spoke of old money, impeccable taste, and unspoken power. The driver, dressed in a crisp black uniform, stepped out swiftly and circled the car to open the passenger door. From the Rolls-Royce stepped Sandra. But she was not the same woman who had walked in the day before. This time, she wore a stunning, elegant dress in deep navy blue, her hair styled to perfection. A delicate necklace sparkled at her collarbone, and her heels clicked with quiet assurance on the stone walkway. She stood tall, not because of the clothes or the car, but because she had always been someone of worth. Now, it was simply visible to the world. At her side was her husband, Mark Peterson. Tall, composed, and effortlessly distinguished in a tailored gray suit, he was known in certain circles but rarely seen in public. A billionaire with vast holdings in real estate and technology, Mark was a man who avoided fanfare, preferring his influence to speak for itself. And when he walked, people noticed. Inside the dealership, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The same group of salespeople who had ignored or mocked Sandra the day before suddenly sprang into action. Phones were dropped mid-call, brochures forgotten, coffee cups set down hastily. Chris, the sharply dressed salesman who had sneered at her, was already halfway to the door, wearing a grin that was now all too eager. "Good morning," he called out. "Welcome to." Sandra walked past him without so much as a glance. Another salesperson stepped forward, hand extended. "Sir, ma'am, how can we assist you today?" Mark gave a polite nod but remained silent. It was Sandra who responded. "We're here to look at a few models," she said, her voice calm and confident. "Though after yesterday, I'm not sure this is the right place." The words landed heavily. Chris's smile faltered. The others stood awkwardly, their faces a mix of recognition and regret. They now saw the woman they had dismissed for who she truly was, not just the wife of a billionaire, but someone who had come in with respect, patience, and sincerity. And they had laughed at her. But it was too late. Sandra and Mark turned and walked toward the cars without waiting for a response. Behind them, the sales team stood frozen, their chance long gone. Mark walked into the dealership with Sandra gracefully by his side. There was no arrogance in his stride, no raised voice, no dramatic entrance, just quiet confidence, the kind that carried far more weight than shouting ever could. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, he exuded composure and authority. Sandra, poised and radiant in her elegant dress, stood beside him with a calm dignity that made it clear she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. As they entered, the same staff who had snubbed Sandra the day before scrambled like startled birds. Conversation ceased. The laughter and casual banter from just moments ago vanished, replaced by an uneasy tension. Phones were set down, postures straightened. Chris, the young salesman who had made the cutting remark about serious buyers, looked visibly uncomfortable, his eyes darting between Mark and Sandra. Mark's voice was steady as he addressed the group at the front desk. "I'd like to speak to the manager, please." There was no room for delay in his tone. One of the staff members nearly tripped over themselves trying to comply. Within seconds, the manager, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a polished demeanor, hurried out from a back office, clearly sensing the urgency. "Mr. Peterson," the manager said with a forced smile, having now realized exactly who had walked into his showroom. "It's an honor. How can we help you today?" Mark and Sandra were escorted to a private seating area, where the staff watched from a respectful distance, trying to appear busy but clearly straining to overhear. Mark leaned forward slightly, hands clasped, and spoke with quiet intensity. "Yesterday, my wife came here to look at a car," he began, his gaze locked on the manager. "She was treated with disrespect and dismissed for looking too simple." The words landed like a thunderclap. The room fell completely silent. The color drained from a few faces. Chris shifted uncomfortably where he stood. Mark continued, his tone unchanged but firm. "We had planned to purchase 3 vehicles today, one for her, one for my company's executive fleet, and one for a family member. But after the way she was treated, we'll be taking our business elsewhere." The manager stammered for a response, but Mark wasn't finished. He stood up slowly and turned toward the gathered staff, letting his eyes rest briefly on Chris and the others who had laughed and dismissed Sandra the day before. "In our world," he said, "judging someone by appearance is not only unwise, it's expensive." The truth of his words hung in the air like a heavy fog. No one moved. No one spoke. The salespeople, once so quick to judge, now stood speechless, their jaws slightly parted in shock, the reality of their mistake settling in. Without another word, Mark turned back to Sandra. She took his arm, and together they walked calmly out of the dealership. Outside, their driver opened the door to the Rolls-Royce Phantom. They stepped in, the engine purred to life, and the car glided away, leaving behind stunned faces, silence, and a hard lesson none of them would soon forget. That day, the dealership learned a powerful and unforgettable lesson: never judge a book by its cover. The atmosphere had shifted entirely from the easy confidence of the morning to something heavier, more introspective. The usual sounds of ringing phones and idle chatter were replaced by silence and awkward glances. Every staff member felt it, that sting of regret, that uncomfortable awareness that they had missed something essential. And it wasn't just about a lost sale. It was about a missed opportunity to show decency, humanity, and respect. Sandra didn't need to shout. She didn't raise her voice or demand apologies. There was no dramatic confrontation, no fiery exchange of words. Her silence carried the weight of 1,000 unsaid truths. The way she walked through the showroom, head held high, spoke volumes. Her grace under pressure, her composure in the face of subtle cruelty, those were louder than any accusation could ever be. Mark, too, could have let his status do the talking. With a single call or a single statement to the press, he could have shattered the dealership's reputation. He could have demanded firings, refunds, or public apologies. He could have made an example of them in the most humiliating way possible. And yet, he didn't. He chose something far more powerful. He chose to make a point, with class. His words were few but sharp, his demeanor calm but unmistakably authoritative. By calmly recounting what had happened, then walking away from a sale worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, he left the staff with something to sit with, the undeniable truth that arrogance and assumptions come at a price. And sometimes, that price isn't just monetary, it's reputational, moral, human. In the end, it wasn't really about the cars. It never was. It was about respect. About dignity. About the simple yet often forgotten truth that everyone, regardless of their appearance, background, or attire, deserves to be treated with kindness and decency. Sandra had walked in as a woman curious about a car. She had walked out as a quiet force who had exposed the shallowness of a business built on perception rather than people. That day rippled through the dealership long after the Phantom disappeared down the street. Salespeople spoke less casually. The receptionist greeted each new customer with more warmth. Even Chris, humbled and quiet, seemed to move with more care. They had all seen what happened when you judge too quickly. And they would remember it. So the next time you meet someone who looks too simple to matter, pause. Look again. Because that person, in their plain clothes or modest shoes, just might be the most powerful person you've ever met. Or the kindest. Or the wisest. Appearances deceive. But character reveals. And sometimes, the most extraordinary people walk quietly, until it's time to be heard. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want more inspiring content, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Got thoughts or experiences to share? Drop them in the comments below, I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.